This is about
Okay,
technical. Yeah, yes, you can ask. So it is something technical.
I think it is a technical question. Probably Mr. Trey might be able to answer. It's I think the participant is asking for that how to switch into the relevant session. So
Yeah.
I think they will be sent the link by the conference organizers.
Yeah, from this link, everybody will be transferred into the themes. Let the time come. So first 2 hours, we have only one session, the main one where we are now. So after this, we will move towards the themes. So you guys will be getting a chance to move either by yourself or the conference organizing team. They are going to forward you or send you to different themes which are appropriate considering your specialization and the title of the paper. Okay, it's exact time, so shall we begin? Dr. Miraj, we are happy to see you, sir. It's been a very long time.
Thank you, Dr. Tahir. Yeah, it's a pleasure to have you again around us. And we have been together in so many occasions, but this time I think we took a long time to reconnect.
So we'll begin after the intro, Dr. Miraj, it's your session, and then Dr. Jim Shin is going to give a keynote.
Yeah.
Oh,
Okay.
Okay.
I think that Dr. Tahir, let's start.
Okay, you're right. Let's begin. Everyone, for those of you, if it is possible for you to turn on camera for at least the first session, it will be very good for the pictorial activity. Otherwise, you can prepare yourself in next, like few minutes. So that will be great. With permission of everybody, let's begin. So formally, I warm welcome everyone into this Global Conference on Business Management and Social Sciences 2023, which is the 25th event of the ABMC. With this event, the ABMC is achieving its Golden Jubilee celebrations for the event, and I congratulate everyone, the wonderful audience, speakers, presenters, and organizers. The conference is a combined effort of the Talent Nurtures Educational Institute and Academy of Business Management Conferences. Both organizations are into the wisdom profession with a high level of dedication and commitment since long. ABMC previous conferences were organized into 20+ countries. I'm thankful to the conference board for nominating me as a convener at this Silver Jubilee of the ABMC event. During and after the COVID, there was a discussion that we shall discontinue the activities we are doing for the scholars because nobody was able to travel. However, the board decided to go ahead and come up with the virtual platform. And since then, we are organizing this activity virtually. And by the coming year, most probably we are going to come back to the physical platforms once again. This year, the theme of conference is a business management and social sciences reflections and direction for the future research. Because we have noticed during the past 4 years, few of the organizations, they cut the research budget because the travel was probably not possible and other research activities. But now things are getting back on track. So that is the reason the conference activities and research activities are getting in action once more time. And we would like to facilitate the researchers, either if they're interested to present the ideas, get their feedback, or they want to get them published into the right journals in the world. Out of 209 abstracts which we have received, 75+ are directly related with the theme and the scope of the event. That's the reason they have been selected for the presentations. I hope these research studies will be driving powerful contributions towards finding the solutions for the different functional challenges faced by the SMEs and conglomerates. During the conference, the speakers from the Harvard, Oxford, Cornell, Yale, Fudan, and Tsinghua will be doing keynote address. I wish you all having the wonderful time ahead. Now it's time to move towards the opening address for the CEO, Talent Nurtures Educational Institute, Dr. Miraj Naeem. Miraj is here. Dr. Miraj, we welcome you into the session. And I am impressed by the operational model of your institution, TNEI, which is educating people from across the world under the governance of professionals from NCC, MIT, Oxford, and UCLA. As an experienced higher educational professional, Miraj has done a PhD and over 2 decades of experience he carries in his credit. And he has been a star in the higher education planning and the quality assurance in the Arab region. He is a certified CSR practitioner from the Center for Sustainability and Excellence and is a trained and certified by the Global Reporting Initiatives for Sustainability Reporting. The approach of blending the professional and philanthropic aspects makes Miraj Ventures a success, makes Miraj Ventures, the activities he is doing in the corporate world, the entrepreneurial and a personal capacity. They are unique in nature, and the candidates are not uplifting their skill set, mindset, heart set, but also the ethical values. Without taking further time, Dr. Miraj, I would like you to go ahead. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Dr. Tahir, and thanks for this wonderful introduction. I am really touched with that introduction. Thanks for that. And beyond that, I'm really thankful to the esteemed gathering that you have given me an opportunity to talk something about myself and my institution. While we go into the formal talk, I would like to share something about the GCBMS itself. I have been connected with Dr. Tahir, and in fact, we are more than friends now, since last maybe a decade or so. I remember the first time I met, it was actually the conference itself. And we had a very quick discussion, but later on, we kept on connecting. And then I have been a part of GCBMS every year. And let me just share this with you that I am a part of so many professional bodies, and I have been attending so many sessions like this. But GCBMS, there are so many nooks and corners which we can pinpoint. But the best part with the GCBMS is the dedication of Dr. Tahir and his team. So I am really thankful to Dr. Tahir that he is maintaining that tempo and he is providing this opportunity every year to all of us. So let's congratulate Dr. Tahir. Moving on, when Dr. Tahir asked me that this is the session you have to go for, I was just thinking about it, that, okay, what should I speak in? I mean, these sessions, these conferences, all these things, they keep on happening every day in our, as a professionals and especially as an academicians. So trust me, when I was just thinking over it, I came across two simple questions. That why it is so that these academic or professional sessions or brainstorming sessions are happening so frequently now. That is one. And secondly, that how we are able to actually attend and participate in so many things. Why it was not possible when we were the student. You can say that I might be becoming a bit unbiased, or I'm thinking negatively that I was not having this opportunity at my time, my school time or my college time as a student. But yes, there is a question. I kept thinking about it. Instead of writing, I just kept thinking, and then I came across the very simple answer. One, that we are gathering obviously for the purpose of research, for the development, for sharing, thought sharing, and these kind of stuff. But how come it is happening so frequently and so smoothly that just now you can see in a fraction of a second, 100 of us are gathering and thus listening to each other. So I realize that it is the simple word which we keep on using every day, the internet. Now, this is a simple word. I am not using the word technology. Deliberately, I am not using, because technology can have so many different connotations. The technology can be in terms of telecom, it can be in terms of transportation, it can be in terms of production, warfare, airfare, so many things. But I am using this term, simple term, internet, as a layman, because what I am now trying to do is anything or everything is related to that layman, that middle class person, which is living in the society, and there is something which I want to share with that. So it is the internet actually which made this possible, that we are all sitting here and doing everything. Based on the same assumption, I have come up with this institution, and I will introduce you something. So the internet is the focal word. The internet is the key, and I hope you all will agree with me that this is the internet which is actually the most powerful tool which in the current scenario, the humankind can actually use and do so many things. So when we say about the internet, it is evident in the fact that the basic element of research are the access to knowledge. The access to knowledge and the flow of information. These are the two basic elements. I mean, if even you look at this session, you will come to the answer that, okay, this is the exchange of ideas. It is the flow of information. It is access to the knowledge. And how it is being possible? It is possible now because of the internet. There can be an answer. There can be an answer. And that is why I just wrote about something that there was a time when we invented the printing press. It was somewhere around in 1600th century that the Chinese actually invented the printing press. That invention of printing press led to the, you can say, the recording of information, as well as maybe it boosted a flow of information, but not that. But the moment you come into the millennium and the moment you come into this century, and this century, by the way, has been very happening. And there are two major events which I feel for. One, the Second World War, which redefined the boundaries, the political boundaries, and so many things, and made the world look completely different. And the second was the advent of this internet, or what we say now as World Wide Web. These two things actually changed the entire world. So the process which was started by the printing press for the flow of information, for recording the information, for sharing the information, it was geometrically multiplied by the invention of internet, and now the buzzword is internet. The internet not only boosted the flow of information by multiple times, but also provided multiple formats in which the information can travel. The process was further facilitated by reducing the cost of technology, especially the information and communication technology. I mean, just imagine, if just go back, I mean, we are all into this era that we are the generation who have seen that analog phase and now the digital phase. So just imagine, just go 20 years back and just think that how much a mobile phone call used to cost us, or this smartphone which we have in our hand and we can easily access everything, how difficult it was to get access to the data of things. So it is just in a span of 20 years, that cost has come down maybe from 100 to maybe now 5 or maybe 2, and maybe somewhere at 0. So you can say that this is one technology which has actually transformed in a very short span of time. No other technology in the world has transformed itself so quickly in terms of development as well as the cost. So based on this, we came up with the idea that, see, the world is facing huge challenges, and especially in terms of social inequality, maybe resources, and so many other things. Among these, one of the major challenges, which the 80% population of the world, when I say 80% population of the world, this is the population which is the middle class, so-called middle class. This middle class has challenges with not only money, but also facilities in terms of traveling, as well as also facilities in terms of having access politically to other countries, traveling, so many things. So does that mean that this 80% chunk should remain aloof, or they should not have any opportunity to touch with the people like you, or maybe a person sitting in Oxford or Stanford, or don't they have the right to touch those high-class universities or high-profile qualifications? So this is the idea, gentlemen. Talent Nurtures is a very humble effort in the direction to provide access to the world-level qualifications to this middle-class section or the economically weaker section of the society. It's simple. It's very simple, and that is why the word talent nurtures, the word nurture, it was decided by my board. In fact, it's my personal aspiration. Nurture means that we will care for them. We will breed them. And how we can do that? It is the only and only way to providing access to the world-class education. So I will not take much time of you guys. The entire idea is that Talent Nurture is an initiative which is completely virtual, completely online. Because if you see in the COVID-19, I mean the year 2019 was a redefining moment in the human civilization. That was a year when we came across this calamity of COVID-19, and then all of you know the story. By the way, again, just to emphasize the power of internet, just to emphasize the power of this virtual technology, we were able to cope up with the calamity like COVID-19 just because of this one technology, internet. There can be so many technologies, they were all, but they were sitting. No airplane was flying, no ship was running, no transport was happening, nothing was happening. What was happening was only this World Wide Web. So Talent Nurtures have started an initiative where now currently in the first phase of our strategic planning, we have acquired the British qualifications, the accreditation for British qualification, and we are offering this to across the world. I mean, it's an online platform. You have so many online platforms. Now the question says that how is it different from the others? It is different from the others that first of all, those platforms which are available virtually, they are asynchronous platform, means the student has to go for a self-paced learning. There is no human interaction. So, and the other who are offering this online along with the synchronous session, along with the human interaction, they are costly. Let me be very frank with you. You go ahead and just check any university, any world-class university, even if they are offering a virtual certificate, it is costing. Number one. Number two, we have to come down to that level of the student whom we are actually targeting. So our modus operandi is that we have identified instructors as per the culture, as per the language, as per their geographical connotations. So if we have a student, maybe let's say 5 students from Malaysia, or maybe 3 students from Arab world, we will employ an Arab instructor for them. It's not that it will be, one box fits for all. So this is the second. And the third, the most important. We have benchmarked our things internationally. And I can proudly say, and people like Dr. Tahir are there to support me. I'm really thankful for financially as well as logistically. that we have done our benchmarking up to the core and we can compete up to the maximum in terms of finance, in terms of economy. So anyway, guys, not taking too much of time, I will conclude my talk. So the point is that Talent Nurture is an organization, and I really wish the best, I mean, your prudent advices and suggestions to pour in. I will be more than happy to have you guys on board for anything. I mean, it's all yours. You can come and join us in any capacity you want. Even if someone wants to be a CEO, it's okay, most welcome, I'm there. So please, guys, I mean, don't take this that this is a commercial venture. It's not at all a commercial venture. By the grace of God, I can earn, Dr. Tahir can earn, and all of you, we all can earn our lives very easily. But it is a different connotation for this venture. So to conclude, I wish to point out just one more thing. There have been 3 apples which have been changing the world time and again. The first was the Adam's apple. It brought the life to the earth. The second was the Newton's apple, which actually stimulated the physics and the research by him. And the third was the Steve Jobs apple. So these 3 apples are basically, you can see that these are the apples who actually kept on changing the world. So I congratulate you guys to be there in these kind of sessions. And I seriously feel that with these kind of sessions, this one and maybe the coming one as well, you will definitely come up with maybe not a fruit, but definitely something which will help the mankind in terms of coming across some new different research, some new development, some new innovation. So that was all from my side. Thanks for being a patient audience. And I really wish you luck for a very productive session. Thank you, Dr. Tahir, and thanks to the entire organizing team. Thanks a lot. Have a nice day.
Dr. Miraj, thank you for sharing the triangulation of apples. So you're right. So Apple remained very, very important in the past and even now. Moving towards the first keynote of the session, Jim Shen. Jim Shen is currently the Dean and the President of Magio Institute for Digital Industry Development and associated as a faculty member with Fudan University. At the Harvard Kennedy School, he is contributing as a first Chinese research associate. Additionally, he works as the co-founder with the President of International Management Association and a member of the Board of Directors for the Coach China Research Center in Spain. Dr. Shen has published over 50 research articles, including journal papers and in the conference proceedings. He has been popular at the Harvard CID Working Paper Series. He was previously a visiting postdoctoral fellow at the Harvard Growth Lab. He obtained his doctorate in development economics at SOAS, University of London, and MSc in economics and management at the London School of Economics and Political Science. So without taking further time, Jim, floor is yours.
Okay, thank you very much for introducing me. And it's my great pleasure and my great honor to present at the nice GCBMS conferences. So for my presentation, I would like to talk about how to write a good paper with an interdisciplinary approach. So rather than presenting some of my latest research findings, I think maybe it's more inspiring or more meaningful and helpful for the audience to know that how to make your paper publishable and how to make your paper publishable at leading journals. So I would like to share some of my own experiences and I very welcome the feedback. So first of all, from my own point of view, a good piece of research should be of 2 very important elements. So first of all, it should be of theoretical importance, of course. So if your work cannot, fill the gap, for the existing literature, then, rarely you can say, your work has some of the marginal, contribution, to the current literature. So one of the most important things that when you start to write your paper is that you always have to be aware whether the work that you are going to do has been done or not in the current in the current literature. So it's very, very important for you to be aware of it. And secondly, I would like to emphasize one point is that normally when you write your papers, it's always very important to put what kind of like research issues or research objects that your work is going to serve, or your work is going to explain. So that is why that the real world problems are the real world problem orientated style of research is very, very important. Now, what I mean by real world problems, the real world problems sometimes have very important policy or industrial implications. So I'm making some of the examples, for example, like metaverse, which is Web 3.0, and there are after the Zuckerberg come up with this fancy concepts, a number of this work and studies have been emergent from the various subjects, including economics, sociology, communication studies. So all this work have shared one common feature is that they wanted to explain, the latest, social or economic or even industrial phenomenon that appeared in practice. So this kind of work sometimes, have very, very strong, academic and practical, implication, and sometimes could attract a lot of attentions. So that is why that if your work or your study, is of very, very, important real world, applications, then your work is, has very high possibility of being, noticed or being, cited. So this is very, very important to remember, I think. So, for example, I also list some of the other two examples. For example, like digital economy, carbon economy. When we talk about, the decarbonizations of, of some countries. So it's very important to make your work, respond to this kind of latest, interesting, phenomena, happened in realities. So such that your work can, attract a lot of attentions, and your work can get a lot of the citations as well. And also that I wanted to talk about and another very important aspect is that even though your research, capture very important, as I said previously, even though your research capture very important for, phenomenon, or even though your paper trying to fill the gap in the current literature, if you cannot, equip yourself, with very strong research methodology, then your work may not be, that qualified, or your work can, may not be, publishable. So what do I mean by a good interdisciplinary research must have a cutting-edge research methodology? What I mean here is that a good research or a frontier research must be supported by cutting-edge research tools. Now, here I mean both quantitative and qualitative methods, which include, for example, like mathematical models construction, econometrical and statistical tools, firm and industrial case analysis. Also, you can conduct some of the very important survey interviews, to implement your fieldwork, and some of the, economic historians really like the historical comparative institution analysis, to do their research. Although not many theoretical economists they use the comparative institution analysis, but some of the scholars, especially from economic history, the CIA approach to study the evolution of the human history, to study the trade, is still a very mainstream and popular in the field. So a good interdisciplinary research, from my point of view, must have some cutting-edge research methodology. Of course, this kind of methodology, include, different, tools, include different, perspectives. But it's always, important, to use these research methods, okay, to serve the real-world problems, that your paper, try to serve. So the innovation of research methods, so how we can judge whether your research methods being used in the paper, as innovative or not. It is actually reflected in two aspects. The first aspect is that the selection of the research tools should serve the research questions, rather than being too instrumentalist. So it's not like, okay, I have, come up with a new research methodology, and it's my, duty to always use it. Although maybe this research method may be very frontier, but if it cannot, serve the research questions that your paper trying to answer, then it kind of like you deviate from the paper, the main doctrine of the paper, and then your paper could be very disqualified. So this is first thing that I wanted to emphasize, is that the selection of research tools is not about more complex the better. It's always about whether it can precisely serve the research questions. So this is one thing I'd like to mention. And the second thing I would like to mention about is that whether or not this research method is interdisciplinary or not, is always reflecting the innovativeness of your research methods. So what I mean here is that the cutting-edge nature of research tools or method is mainly reflected in the interdisciplinary attributes of research methods. So if the interdisciplinary attributes of your research methods is very notable, then, for example, like machine learning, network science, these subjects combine different branches of mathematics, and also combine some of the knowledge from the statistics and the probability theory, something like that. Then this kind of research methods are endowed with very strong interdisciplinary attributes and natures. And then when you use this method, and when you apply these tools in your research, you can make sure that your research tools are cutting edge nature, are of cutting edge nature and frontier. So the interdisciplinary aspect of your research methods is always linked to the cutting edge nature of your research tools being applied in your study. So how to get real world problems, how to get inspirations, for your paper questions, with strong theoretical and practical implication. There are several ways. I'd like to summarize into three aspects. So first of all, of course, that you have to be very familiar with the cutting edge literature in a certain field. So you have to be, familiar with what has been done in the field. And then you can, see whether the work that you're going to write about is, distinct from the previous work. Of course, that it's sometimes the real world problem can also come from the, the hot media news. For example, you can, listen to, BBC, CNN, this kind of, this kind of news from, from different mainstream media, and you can get a lot of inspiration from this kind of hot media news. And of course, the articles in newspaper, magazines, in New York Times, which are related to the field, and also for my personal hobby is to read the Harvard Business Review. So I always get a lot of, important ideas and very, very interesting, research questions, when I read the Harvard Business Review. So the second way in which you can adopt, to get the real world problem is through the means of reading more hot media news and articles in newspaper and other magazines, so on. So the third point, actually, I'd like to emphasize here is that in order to get real world problems, or in order to get the inspirations for your paper writings, so it's always very important for you to interact with more people from enterprises, government department, and participate frequently, in different academic activities held by the different universities around the globe. So it's very important for you to exchange your research ideas with peers, and to know that so sometimes it's always very helpful for you to know what other people are doing, and then they will give you a lot of important and useful information, and which sometimes could be crucial for you to develop your own ideas. So it's always very important to not only communicate with the people from academia, but also try your best to communicate with the people from different fields, for example, from from the industry, from the government department, and so that you can broaden your and enrich your views about the question that you wanted to solve in your work. So this is the three ways that you can adopt to get real world problem, to get inspiration for your paper. So of course that the final the very last final thing that I wanted to mention here is it's always for a researcher, it's always very important to receive very rigorous training in cutting edge research tools. Now this is, I think, a very a personal thing, because some people will find some of the methods being more suitable for their research questions, but some other researchers will find some other research methods being more suitable for their research questions. But I just list some of the cutting edge tools that are currently used most in the literature. So these tools are normally quantitative, and they are mainly in applied mathematics and statistics. They are widely used in the management science, in economics, in the sociology, in the political science, and these methods are widely applied in a lot of social science subjects. For example, like optimal control, optimization theory, linear programming, operational research, and of course the network science and the time series and analysis. So these methods, of course, if you can make your continuous effort to learn these tools, it will be perfect for you to to conduct the frontier research if you have very important real world problem or questions that your work is going to serve. Because you can use this frontier research tools to serve the question that you are going to ask, you are going to serve in your paper. So the last thing that I wanted to emphasize is that if the most difficult or challenging part for researcher to do research is that some of the research, why some of the research could be so innovative, could be so breakthrough, in the literature, is that they bring the paradigm shift. Now, what do I mean by paradigm shift? Of course, that the famous philosopher Kuhn come up with this idea first. And the paradigm shift is something that your research is not only new, or is not only distinct from the previous study, but also you come up with the with the innovative and breakthrough ideas and tools that you are using in your paper. So I make an example in the field of development economics. So at Harvard Growth Lab, so we are trying to do the paradigm shift research, in the sense that we trying to develop very, advanced, the topological method and the network science method, to capture, what is happening within the, different industries on the product space framework. So in this theory, you can see that there are two innovative aspects there. So first of all, the tools are new. The research questions are also new, right? So the tools are the network science, part, which is, which the researcher from the lab, trying to develop, to come up with the new, tools, right? And this is something that never been done, by the previous literature. When we talk about, industrial relatedness, when we talk about this kind of like a product space thing, right? So this part is the first innovative part that the work by the Harvard Growth Lab come up with. And the second thing is that even though you have developed a new, innovative, research tools, which the previous work haven't, developed, you always have to realize that, which I mentioned previously as well, that whether your research tools, can help you solve the questions that you are going to answer in your paper. And these kind of questions, must be new as well, must be innovative as well. So if you use this kind of new developed tools to, to answer why, how the, equilibrium price is determined by supply and demand, then this is not the, new questions, right? This is not the, the new, real world problem of phenomenon, being emerging in practice. So at Harvard Growth Lab, we are going to use the newly developed, network topological method to answer that why, the different industries with different, capabilities could be related, and how a country, could utilize this kind of industrial relatedness, development strategy, to develop, to grow their economy. And this is something that very new in the development literature, because in the past, always the industries, when we talk about the development of a country or the growth of an economy, we especially from the neoclassical economics, perspective, the industries are normally either horizontally linked or vertically linked. But in our framework, we are trying to, answer the question. Actually, there are more, complex than that. Though, there are something more complex than that. The industries themselves, are actually connected in a network, right? And then you can use the, the algebra and the linear algebra or matrix forms to describe this kind of to describe this kind of network structure, of the industry of a particular country. So this is something that also, very important to realize that if you wanted to have a paradigm shift research, the two conditions sometimes must be satisfied. One is that you have to develop your new research tools. The second thing is that your research issues must be of importance and the novelty. If these two, conditions are met, so possibly that your research could be, paradigm shifting. So this is the presentation that I would like to give for the conference. So again, thank you very much for having me during for the conference. So so feedback appreciated, and yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Jim, for the detailed discussion. Wonderful ideas. Definitely, they are going to give us benefit as we go along in the research field. Now, the next speaker of the session is Dr. Heidi Brooks. Heidi Brooks teaches and advises on the subject of everyday leadership, which is a new concept, the everyday micro moments of the impacts that shape our experiences. Dr. Brooks specializes in a large-scale culture change projects focused on individuals and collective leadership effectiveness in the organization. She has been a popular speaker at different occasions in the past. Dr. Brooks, over the last decade and a half, she is developing interpersonal skills of the MBA students at the Yale School of Management. She pioneered the Everyday Leadership course at Yale, where she first taught the principles of everyday leadership, and she also specializes in emotional intelligence, power, politics, and the team management. Brooke received her doctorate in psychology from University of California and the bachelor degree from Brown University. Since she graduated, she is associated with different popular organizations and the known schools in the world, such as Yale. So without taking further time, let's go and have fruitful thoughts from Brooks.
Ma'am, your mic is muted, I suppose. Dr. Brooks.
Everyday leadership, the way that we lead and interact every day, that crafts our lived experience. I am glad to be able to talk with you. I thought what I'd do for these 10 minutes is tell you a little bit about a course that I teach called Interpersonal and Group Dynamics. That's a particularly a popular course with usually quite a long wait list. It's a memory maker of a course in the tradition of the material that David Bradford started at Stanford. A number of people teach this course, but just not enough. So I thought I would take this opportunity today to tell you a little bit about that in case it's relevant for you in your organizations or contexts where you might be able to apply some of this idea. So this course called Interpersonal Dynamics has 3 segments. For the first third of the course, we are getting used to learning. It's asking this question of how can we learn in this experiential course that's really about learning interpersonally. So knowledge is really not enough for this course. We really want to be in the practice. So it's a practicum experience. Here, we assume that we don't necessarily learn from books only. We certainly have theory and concepts that support what we are doing, some guidelines, rigors, we certainly dig into the social science research, and most of the capacity for building the ability to act in this domain really comes from experience and reflecting on experience. So that's where we spend the first third of the course, really a learning how to learn interpersonally focus. A little bit of an orientation to how to engage in the course. The second third of the course is all about building up skills and mindsets that help you to experiment in skillful ways in the right direction so that people can refine and practice their skills. And then the last third of the course is all about using what you've learned in stretch applications. So let me say a little bit more about each of those. First third. The portion that's about learning to learn. One of the things I really want to mention is that the course uses an assumption of directing your own learning. Why? Because I can tell the students what to do, but it really works much better if it connects with something that they care about. And so I start by asking the students, what's your agenda for yourself in this domain? And they say things like, I'd like to be more persuasive. I'd like to be able to speak up more often or under stress. I'd like to be able to listen more effectively. I'd like to be able to give and receive feedback, participate in more conflict successfully and productively. I'd like to see how I'm seen by others. I'd like to be less reactive and more patient. I'd like to be more attuned to others. I'd like others to be more attuned to me. I'd like to be more influential. I'd like to trust myself more. These kind of things are quite common for people to be able to name at all levels. And so when we start with an invitation to notice your own agenda, it taps into 3 things that really motivate adult learners: autonomy, mastery, and connection. So adults like to have some sense that they can drive their own learning without necessarily being told what to do. And they like some sense of forward momentum, that there is possibility to move towards some sense of ease or mastery. And often this material gives people a chance to connect with other learners on the way. So this course is a memory maker and often offers transformational opportunity because we put together all 3 of these things: autonomy, mastery, and connection in a sequence that has people feel more confident and free to be able to expand their capacity in a way that's relevant to them, that they have chosen, that they are directing. So the other thing that I'll say about the first part of the course, in addition to directing your own learning, you have to learn how to kind of experiment, how to nudge yourself into new domains. And so the idea is to get 10 or 15% outside of your comfort zone, that is the domain of learning, where you might be able to stretch, experiment, nudge. It's kind of like, safe to fail kind of experiments that you are running. And so at this point, we want people to start to pick up skills of self-disclosure, this idea that if you want to connect, you might need to be able to let yourself be known for what you're thinking and feeling, reveal a little bit more about yourself. We know the social science research on self-disclosure indicates that disclosures that are a little bit more personal are more effective, create more connection than a greater number of facts that are disclosed. And so I consider it a skill that we actually have to practice and learn to do. Many people in the context where I teach just tend to keep their cards too close to their chest to really have some sense that people know them. And it's hard to lead others through relational means if you're not able to relate and connect and create some sense of attunement that's mutual. So self-disclosure becomes a skill. Very few people in the classrooms where I am, though they are present, are learning to say less, to reveal less, but it is valid as a continuum. Other skills, just to name, some overlap with the goals that I mentioned before: listening, being curious, expressing empathy, related to empathy and self-disclosure is kind of skillful, kind of grounded vulnerability. It's not about just kind of saying random things that are facts about you or your deepest, darkest secrets. It's about what is your skin in the game about what's relevant to the group work. And so for example, if you're working on a team, you can say, I really care that this project goes well. And I'm a little bit anxious that we all kind of focus and pay attention. And so just a little bit of your experience. It works differently across cultures, across languages. So we do have to do a contextual analysis of what really makes sense. And I think that goes in our skill set too. We might add the skills of emotional agility to be able to notice what's happening with people in the affective landscape, so that if we're talking about everyday and relational experiences, we have to attend to how people are feeling as well as how they are producing results at work. To at least these two different aspects certainly matter. So a little bit and to develop at work. And we want to be able to unleash people's potential, and feedback really helps with that. And maybe a final skill set that's kind of multifaceted, but to be able to engage in productive conflict. Inevitably at work, there are tensions and conflicts. Some of those are task-based and some of those are come from other sources. But if we can actually use that conflict for productive tension to unearth some of the value that's behind conflict and to dissipate the tensions that are not productive, we can actually work more smoothly. And so there's a skill set in there. Again, these are things we can experiment with, get a 10%, 15% outside of your comfort zone, so that it stretches you in a direction that helps to expand that comfort zone. And of course, you have to have some sense of how to do this. This talk does not allow for really teaching in more detail, but how to actually work on all of those skills. So we're just naming some of the things that we wind up focusing on. And the third thing to bring in here, the third part of the course is really all about practice, which happens all along. But it's also the case that in the last third of the course, we want to focus explicitly on stretch applications of what we've been learning for as the rest of the course has set up. And so I have three things that I think particularly help us in the context of the US. I tend to choose connecting across difference and talking about discussions of power and influence and authority. And the third thing I tend to focus on is focusing on norms and roles in the groups that we're in. So some conversation here and now with others about all three of these things tend to be stretch conversations that really at the group level give us a chance to really apply and stretch our skills. Now, all of this happens in the context of creating the conditions for learning in the group, enough psychological safety, enough permission for candor, that the group conditions are conducive to the members being able to learn. And in this way, there's connection through being learners together. When groups learn together, it tends to be the case that feedback is normative. It's actually just how we do things around here in these groups. So we need quite a bit of time to be able to do this. The students spend 3 hours in class and 3 hours in lab with facilitators, and we go on a 3-day weekend most of the way through the course. This set of experiences comes together as a kind of memory-making experience in learning about interpersonal and group dynamics that the students wind up sometimes referring to as a bit of magic. It's not magic at all. It's just being human quite intentionally as learners together. I consider it a kind of study in being human well. And when we take the time and intentionally engage, it gives us a chance to, let the kind of healthy, natural human patterns emerge. And in that context, when people enjoy learning together about how to craft work experiences in groups that really bring out the best and unleash the potential of their members, it offers people a lot of hope for humanity. And so I call this work hope for humanity. I do the same work in my advisory approach. I haven't spoken here about doing this work with executives and managers of the workplace, telling you the course sequence, but it is somewhat similar in working in organizations. So this is not just work for students, but work for all of us. And I think it's great for us elevating, connecting, and can change our experience of work, workplaces, and working. Thanks for listening with me today. And I hope there's been something here for you. Take care now.
I extend my thanks to the presenter. This was a recorded session. In case if you have some questions, you can put it into the chat box. You will be replied. Some of the sessions are recorded session in this conference because of the time lag. So the next session is of another speaker, which is also a recorded session, Mr. Martin. And Martin is a professor of finance and economics at the Oxford University and a research member with the European Corporate Governance Institute, Brussels. Martin previously served as assistant professor at the University of Michigan and has taught PhD courses and won a Teaching Excellence Award for his case-based visualization. He now teaches at the Oxford MBA program, Big Data and the Machine Learning in Finance. He holds a PhD in economics from Princeton University, USA. He has published many research papers, and his research on how to ownership structure of firms affected the firm's behavior and market outcomes has affected policymaking worldwide. His research has been published in the Journal of Finance and won various awards, including a Battle Group Distinguished Paper Series. It has been covered by the New York Times, The Economist, Wall Street Journal, Financial Times, and Bloomberg. He was invited to present the regulator and the policymaking across the globe, including the US, Department of Justice in the US also, and the White House Council of Economic Advisors. So after this introduction, I request Mr. Trey to play the recorded session of the speaker.
Thank you very much for the opportunity to speak to you about reflections and directions for future research in business management and the social sciences. I'm going to share my screen to show you what I'm going to talk about. I would like to motivate this with newspaper articles that I'm sure many of you will have seen. Corporate control by universal investors. Is that a good or a bad thing? For example, during the COVID pandemic, the Financial Times reported that drug makers were urged to collaborate on a coronavirus vaccine, whereas investors explicitly said that competition needs to be put aside for the greater good. So competition is not good, apparently, according to these investors. Now, you can see where that might come from. One could share IP about vaccines, but at the same time, competition is generally believed to serve consumer welfare and also enhance innovation. So whether this is just good for investors or also good for the world is an open question. And indeed, the big asset managers, most vocally perhaps BlackRock, have also engaged in the climate change debate, arguing that their products somehow help us from climate change. That, of course, is also something that not everybody finds good. For example, Texas politicians that produce a lot of oil or represent communities that didn't like that very much. And indeed, below I quote that in mid last year, the US Senate Banking Committee was planning to hold a hearing on how index funds move their shares. Some senators have even sponsored legislation that seek to curtail, so limit the voting power of large asset managers. So more precisely speaking, the motivation for the research I want to present are policy debates that are related to the apparently changing nature of corporate ownership. For example, Oliver Hart and Luigi Zingales are part of a large debate on universal ownership, the idea here being that universal investors that have a stake in the overall economy, as people say, might help us address social problems such as climate change by changing firm objectives. Now, the authors there do note that that could come with a problem. For example, when an asset manager owns stakes in all firms, they will also own stakes in competitors. That is what we dubbed the common ownership problem, and that might cause a lessening of competition, which might be harmful to society. Right? Some legal scholars have proposed remedies for that and suggested that assuming that common ownership is a problem across industries, perhaps structurally we should also make changes to their ability to vote shares or on the portfolios they can hold. In particular, Dorothy Shapiro-Lund, for example, has proposed that passive investors be disallowed from voting their shares in the first place. Now, what this paper is about is to attempt to provide a factual basis for that policy debate. So I think these debates are important, but they don't have much of a factual basis. For example, is universal ownership perhaps just more important empirically than common ownership? Or is common ownership perhaps more important than universal ownership, and therefore the concerns perhaps more pronounced? Then how widespread is common ownership of industry rivals across industries? We don't know. Is common ownership actually driven by indexing, or is it driven by active strategies? All of these we don't know, because what we kind of know so far is mostly based on 13F institutional ownership records, which in many cases are incorrectly parsed, but also are just not comprehensive, as I will illustrate in a moment. So the message I want to bring across in this talk is that future research on corporate behavior should be based on comprehensive ownership data, and that's what this paper is about. In case you remember nothing else, remember that there is a website called corporateownershipdata.com on which we make available freely to academic researchers the database on which this talk here is based. So anybody who is interested in researching effects of changes in corporate ownership should take a look at that. Now, to illustrate why research on the typically used 13F institutional ownership data is problematic, I'm showing a table with the largest institutional shareholders of 3 waste management companies. In a public, also Vanguard, BlackRock, State Street, and Waste Management, and in Rollins, Vanguard, somebody else at BlackRock and State Street. So you might be tempted to think that there's a lot of common ownership between these. Now, the problem with that table is it misses the insiders, the corporate insiders. So, for example, Jeff Bezos at Amazon or Elon Musk and Tesla would be corporate insiders and not file 13Fs, but a different form with the SEC. Or 13D block holders, such as Elon Musk and Twitter, would have to file yet another form, not a 13F. Other block holders, such as family offices, would have to file a 13G. So there's many other ownership records that are not 13Fs you would need to complete the picture. And indeed, the table above is wrong. I'll show you a correct table now that is more comprehensive. Cascade Investments, that family office by Bill Gates, is actually by far the largest shareholder of Republic, holding a third of the voting shares, and is also a passive investor in waste management, so has cash flow rights and a profit interest in that. By the way, the Bill Gates Foundation is a large investor as well, right? So if you wanted to compute to which extent the actually largest shareholders of Republic also have cash flow interests in waste management, that would be called common ownership, you actually need a comprehensive ownership record. You might make the opposite mistake too, by ignoring the fact that a investor that does not hold large stakes in the competitors is the largest shareholder of Rollins. So common ownership could also be smaller than you would believe based on 13F records alone. So what I want to bring across is that if you come across papers that only use 13F records alone, even if they were correctly parsed, they simply don't capture the full variation in ownership structures across firms, and therefore probably suffer from severe estimation bias. Okay, so what we do in our work, this is with Amir Amilzadeh, my colleague at Oxford, as well as my student Fiona Kasperk in a paper called Mavericks, Universal Owners and Common Owners, the largest shareholders of America's largest firms, is to create a database that has all these different filings. And that then allows us to find out who the largest owners are and what their portfolio interests are. Based on that, we can answer the question whether universal ownership is a bigger phenomenon or a smaller phenomenon than common ownership, and do it kind of correctly. And third, we can find out what the drivers are of universal ownership and common ownership. And briefly, what we find is that ownership structures are more heterogeneous across firms than 13F data alone would indicate. We find second that common ownership of product market rivals is higher than across industry. Common ownership, that become universal ownership, which also suggests that textbook indexing is not the only driver of common ownership. And indeed, our data shows that the ownership by the big three, BlackRock, Vanguard, State Street, but positively contributes to common ownership over and above indexing. And this result overturns existing findings in the literature. Third, we find that activists contribute positively to common ownership. Fourth, we find that insiders and non-financial blockholders tend to hold concentrated positions and negatively contribute to common ownership. And finally, that mergers of asset managers contribute positively to common ownership and universal ownership. Now I'll race through the results within the remaining time. Here is a cross-section of America's largest 500 single-class firms. And what you see in green is the average share of equity held by the big three asset managers. In blue, the average share held by other asset managers. In red, the share held by activists, and in yellow, the share held by insiders. So for example, for the firm here, for which we find almost 100%, or actually more, of the common stock outstanding that happens due to short selling, for example, you can see that most of it is held by asset managers, but there do exist firms that have a very large fraction of their equity held by insiders and activists, and those you would miss, right? So scraping just 13F filings, you would miss all the variation indicated by the yellow and red spikes here in the data. You would also get wrong who the largest owners of America's largest firms are. Briefly speaking, before 2009, some sort of asset manager tended to be the largest shareholder of pretty much all firms, but it was a different asset manager across different firms. Whereas after 2009, that's when the BlackRock BGI merger was consummated. Increasingly, it is one of the big three asset managers that are now the largest owners of a majority of America's largest publicly traded firms. What else I want to show you, this graph shows that both common ownership in red and universal ownership in black increased over time, but importantly, common ownership is a more important phenomenon than universal ownership. So that helps to perhaps argue that the debate on universal ownership and its potentially beneficial effects cannot be held without also thinking about the competition problem. Finally, here's a regression table that runs kappas, those are the measures of common ownership and universal ownership, on the holdings by the different types of investors, and contrast that regression to the one in the literature, the finding by Bacchus, Conlon, and Sinkinson, that after controlling for the effect of indexing, the big three holdings exert a negative influence on common ownership. And what we show in our paper is that this is not correct. Once you use correct and comprehensive data, this effect is actually positive. So that flips the sign in these regressions. Now, almost out of time. so let me be judicious with it. The final message I wanted to get across is that asset manager mergers increase universal ownership and common ownership of competitors. What I'm showing here on the left is the implied increase in common ownership. If one took the BlackRock and BGI pre-merger portfolios and then recalculated how high would common ownership have been had they already merged,
Video is paused.
Here we show that in a regression form, but what it means is you can use that as a shock to the common ownership concentration or universal ownership concentration between firms. So to summarize, there's a much greater variation in ownership structures than previously believed. Common ownership is a more important phenomenon than universal ownership, so you really can't ignore that in a discussion of universal ownership. It is not just driven by indexing, but also by the concentration within the big three, but not only that, because also activists are driving common ownership and universal ownership by simply holding shares, large blocks of shares in competitors. You wouldn't know any of that if you only used 13F filings, so you shouldn't, because that likely causes bias in regressions. And you can figure all of this out by going to corporateownershipdata.com, getting yourself the data and playing with it yourself. Thank you very much for your interest and attention, and please email me with any questions. Thank you.
I extend thanks to Martin on behalf of conference organizing team and the researchers. So next speaker of session is Andrew Stark. This I conducted interview by myself just a few days back. Andrew Stark is a professor of strategic management and a political science expert at the University of Toronto. He has been a policy advisor in the Office of Prime Minister of Canada, a guest scholar at the Brookings Institution, a fellow at the Sephora Center for Ethics at the Harvard, a fellow at the Woodrow Wilson International Center for Scholars at Washington, a Fulbright Senior Research Scholar at Columbia University. And his articles, which he has published in the past 20 years, are very popular, and they have been cited multiple times by the different publications such as Wall Street Journals and Brooks. And his articles and theories are referred not only in different institutions in the US, but outside the country in different other corporate world. So let's have a few thoughts from Andrew.
Topic is business management and social sciences, reflections and directions for future research. In order to talk about directions for the future, though, we must reflect on the past. I'm a political scientist by background, and my academic interest is in the area of corporate social responsibility. When I reflect on the past 40 to 50 years of public and academic debate on the subject, I see three broad changes, maybe even revolutions, in the role of the corporation in society that strike me as noteworthy and that set the direction for future research. Although I think that what I'm going to say will have broader implications, I should mention that my focus will be on American corporations, just because that's the focus of my research interests. And I'll be speaking of broad trends. So there are probably many exceptions to what I'm going to say, but I'm speaking very broadly. So the first change is this. 40 or 50 years ago, critics of corporate behavior argued that businesses have social responsibilities that go beyond whatever the baseline law requires. So businesses should help their local communities build schools and hospitals, not just through their tax contributions, but through philanthropy. And businesses should clean up their environmental waste and make sure their products are safe, not just if regulations require them to do so, but even if they don't. By contrast, most managers, along with defenders of the market system like Milton Friedman, argued that corporations had no business being socially responsible or doing anything other than serving the interests of the shareholders. Businessmen and businesswomen, Friedman said, lack the knowledge or expertise to address social problems. A manager has no idea where to locate a hospital or what kind of school is the best one to build, nor, unlike elected politicians, are managers in a position to be held accountable by the public for the way they decide to clean up the environment or improve product safety. Maybe the public has a different view, and so managers lack legitimacy in making these kinds of decisions. That was 40 years ago. Much has changed. Today, it's a growing number of business people who argue that, compared with governments, corporations actually command greater expertise and legitimacy when it comes to addressing social issues. According to this view, inefficient and ineffectual elected governments have lost legitimacy in the eyes of voters, and they are staffed by bureaucrats whose expertise in many areas is far less impressive than that possessed by the kinds of experts that businesses can afford to hire, such as environmental technologists, healthcare specialists, experts in education and training. So business people are beginning to shoulder government out of the way in the United States, Canada, and elsewhere, using wealth generated by their corporations to fund their own initiatives in policy areas like healthcare, science, education, social welfare, and so forth. For example, the Gates Foundation, which is funded by the wealth Bill Gates created at Microsoft, has given over $100 million to support the creation of a set of common core standards in American schools. Accordingly, it's now critics of corporations, mostly progressive political activists, who deny that business people have either the legitimacy to assume social responsibilities, nobody elected them, or even have the objective expertise, since after all, business people and the corporations see things from their own self-interested perspective. One writer, for example, criticized Bill Gates for trying to be, and I'm quoting, the unelected superintendent of American schools. By undertaking their own initiatives in social, educational, and health policy, critics are now saying, corporations are usurping the role of government. So that's one change that's occurred over the last 40 years. Critics of corporations used to demand that businesses get involved in resolving social problems, while managers resisted. Now it's just as likely to be managers who are thinking about taking initiatives in resolving social problems and critics who are resisting. Here's another change. It has to do not with the extent to which corporations should or should not take over government's role, but how much influence corporations should have over government decisions. So 40 or 50 years ago, managers vigorously defended the rights of corporations in America and elsewhere to spend money lobbying government to get it to pass legislation favorable to corporate interests. Critics of corporations complained about this practice. After all, if a corporation had a lot of money to spend hiring high-priced lobbyists to get politicians to lower its taxes, an anti-poverty group, meanwhile, with very meager resources, could barely get a hearing from officials when it wanted taxes increased in order to support social programs. 50 years later, now, it's corporations who would rather not engage government on many policy matters, while it's their critics who want the corporation to do so. Think of the Disney Corporation, whose managers preferred to remain silent about a piece of legislation in Florida that had to do with the discussion of sexual orientation in public schools. Meanwhile, it was Disney's critics, including many of its own consumers and employees, who insisted that the company use its influence with the government in Florida to oppose the legislation. So the second change is that while 50 years ago, critics of corporations opposed corporate attempts to influence government, while managers supported it. Now, much more often than it used to be, it's managers who are saying that the corporation really has no business attempting to influence government, while corporate critics are demanding that they do so. Here's the third and final change. 40 or 50 years ago, shareholders, consumers, suppliers, and employees competed over corporate resources. When academics proposed the stakeholder theory of the firm around 30 years ago, they gave legitimacy to this conflict, to the idea that it wasn't shareholders alone, but all these other corporate constituents as well, who had a rightful claim to corporate wealth. Maybe shareholders should sacrifice some profit so that employees could be paid a better wage, or that suppliers could, in their supply chain, could create better working conditions in their factories or farms, or so that consumers could pay a lower price. And of course, all of these stakeholder groups really were competing with each other as well, not just with shareholders. Putting more money back into the consumer's pocket meant less money for higher wages for workers, for example. This kind of conflict, of course, still rages. It hasn't been replaced, but something new has come up alongside of it. Stakeholder groups are now beginning to compete not only over economic resources of the corporation, but political matters. And their competition is much more directly with each other, with the corporation simply acting as kind of a field of combat. So, for example, investors are threatening to pull out of companies that sell to a consumer whose politics they oppose, as when Amazon shareholders opposed that company's sale of facial recognition technology, which can be racially biased, to the United States government. Consumers recently organized a boycott of Goya Foods in the United States when its CEO indicated his personal support for Donald Trump, thus targeting the personal political views of a corporate employee. Facebook employees walked out in protest over their company's willingness to draw on suppliers of content whose political views they opposed. Suppliers are threatening to no longer do business with a company if some of its investors have taken political positions they dislike, as when an American beverage company refused to supply its products to a restaurant in Washington, D.C., unless it changed its owners because of the restaurant's opposition to certain COVID restrictions. Some of these kinds of activities were not totally unheard of decades ago, but they're much more common today. Now, I have characterized these three changes as revolutions, but in fact, they are evolutions. Let me restate them in that evolutionary frame. Decades ago, when critics of corporations wanted businesses to be socially responsible, they had in mind activities that tended to fall very much within the corporation's sphere of interest. They were thinking largely of corporate support for the local community, as well as the responsibility of a company to clean up after its environmental waste or ensure that its products were safe beyond what the law might have required. Today, when it's managers who are promoting corporate social responsibility, the social responsibility they're talking about often falls way outside the corporation's sphere of interest, as when corporate wealth, like Bill Gates's, funds education, health, social policy, and other initiatives that have little to do with their company's original mission. Likewise, decades ago, when businesses defended corporate engagement with government, the engagement concerned policies that fell within the corporation's sphere of interest. Automobile companies lobbying government to minimize regulation on certain safety issues, or the financial services industry lobbying for the deregulation of certain financial products. Today, when it's corporate critics who are trying to push for corporations engaging the government, it's on policies, again, that lie outside the corporation's sphere of interest, as, for example, with Disney and the question of whether sexual orientation should be discussed in public schools. That has nothing really to do with Walt Disney's mission as a corporation. Meanwhile, it's managers who are saying that corporations should not engage government on issues outside their sphere of interest. In support of Disney's hesitancy to lobby government on the schools issue, for example, the CEO of the cryptocurrency company Coinbase declared, and I'm quoting, that it's inappropriate for a corporation to lobby government on broader social issues that are unrelated to its core mission. And finally, 30 or 40 years ago, corporate stakeholders battled each other over something that lay very much within the corporation's sphere of influence or sphere of interest, namely the corporation's own wealth and resources and how best to divide them. But today, battles between stakeholders are ranging over issues that lie far afield from anything the corporation might care about. An employee's support for a presidential candidate, for example, or the American government's immigration policies and how it might use facial recognition technology in enforcing them. So in short, over the past 40 years, the corporation in America and increasingly elsewhere is turning from an economic into a political institution. A transformation is occurring, one pushing the corporation from being an economic entity, minding its own business, into a much more avowedly political one, with a role, theoretically, in just about any political issue or social issue that anybody wants to use it to take a role in. Both managers and their critics, both capitalists and their opponents, are pulling the corporation in this direction. We haven't yet begun to understand the implications of this change. And here I will move from the past to the future of social scientific research and management. If you look at business schools across America and Europe, you will see that they are populated by social scientists. With the exception of the field of operations research, whose scholars are applied mathematicians, you will find that marketing departments are populated to no small degree by psychologists, organizational behavior departments by sociologists and psychologists, finance and economics departments by economists, and strategy departments by academics from all of these fields, as well as perhaps the law, from law schools. But where are the political scientists? After all, political science, along with sociology, economics, and psychology, is a foundational social science. It's true, some business schools do have social scientists on faculty, often in their strategy departments. But what do they write about? To a large degree, it's about questions that have been around for 40 or 50 years, the extent to which corporate lobbying on matters of interest to the corporation, regulatory issues affecting business, is successful or unsuccessful, or is a good thing or a bad thing. Otherwise, they tend to write about political science issues that have little to do with business at all, such as voting procedures in legislatures. So on our topic, business management and social sciences, reflections and directions for future research, I've given you my reflections on the recent past. The corporation is becoming a more deeply and perhaps irrevocably political institution than ever before. And my principal suggestion for future social scientific research is a very broad and simple one. In this day and age, when the corporation is moving from being an economic to becoming a much more political entity, let's engage in social scientific research on the corporation going forward, the one social science that hasn't been marshaled really so far. Let's send in the political scientists. That's it.
Thank you, Professor Andrew. Thank you very much for covering the business side and the social science side in a very comprehensive way. With your permission, I'm just stopping now recording. Okay, so you have seen the comments and thoughts of Mr. Andrew. He is having a rich and vast experience. Last but not least, speaker of the day, Lindsay Cameron. Lindsay is an assistant professor of management at the Wharton School, University of Pennsylvania. Her research focused on how algorithm management is changing the modern workplace, especially individuals' behavior at work. Professor Cameron has an ongoing 5 years work of the large employer in the gig economy. So he has done extensive work in the gig economy. She is currently working on how the COVID pandemic is affecting the gig workers on different platforms even after the COVID. Professor Cameron's work has been published in the leading academic journals, including Organizational Science, Journal of Applied Psychology, Organization Behavior, and Human Resource Decision Processes. She has also published opinion pieces in Society of Human Resource Management flagship magazine, People and Strategy, and her research has been mentioned in numerous media outlets, including Bloomberg, World Economic Forum, and CNBC. So Trey, if you can play the recorded session of Lindsay.
Hello, everyone. I'm Lindsay Cameron, an assistant professor of management at the Wharton School, and I'm delighted to speak with you today at this remarkable conference. I only wish that I could be there in person, but please, my door is open for conversations or if you want to continue the dialogue. And here I'll be talking just a little bit about the future of work and is it here yet? You've been a little kid in the car with your parents. You've asked, are we there yet? Are we there yet? Well, are we yet at the future of work? I hope to tackle just a little bit of this big question right now. So around the future of work, there's a lot of talk about AI. Is it augmenting work or is it replacing work? And are we in the middle of the fourth industrial revolution? And you may have seen some of these conversations in the media. Amazon's created a hiring tool to help recruit a more diverse workforce. It's actually discriminating against certain groups of people. Or chatbots that do the similar sort of spouting racist propaganda. This right here is a bakery in Japan in which makes a lot of different types of treats, and they actually use AI as part of the cash register to ring out the treats only because it's so hard for the worker to remember them all. So is this the future of work, you might be thinking? Well, I split the future of work into these 4 different components. Who does the work? Are they independent workers? Are they contractors? Do they work, remotely via the computer? When and where the work is getting done? How the work is being managed? And who helps with the work? So these are 4 different intersections that fit within the bigger umbrella of the future of work. And that's what I'll be going a little bit deeper into right now. So who does the work? When we think about traditional employment, it's a 9 to 5. You go to the office for the entire day, you have a manager, and then you come back home. This is the ideal worker, at least in the US context. But more and more, work is shifting to this non-traditional format. And this is the case in the United States. And in many ways, I think the US is catching up to the rest of the world's economy, because most of the world's economy are in what we call contingent or precarious work. So work that's short-term, part-time, often doesn't come with these employee benefits that, such as a defined pension contribution. Many companies are increasing their use of contingent workers over the next few years because it saves cost. And in North America, we've got 15 to 25% of our workforce that are doing this particular type of work. And as I mentioned before, in the global context, it's even more, up to 40% of the economy are from these individuals who are not in traditional work contracts. Now, there is a subset of individuals who see themselves more as free agents. These are these high-skilled Ruby on Rails programmers who do their work from Bali or faraway places. But more and more, we've got workers who are doing this out of necessity. This is the best job that they can possibly find, is this contingent work without any benefits. And they are really hoping to get into standard employment relationships. So why do companies prefer this type of work? Well, obviously, it helps them save money. They don't have to pay the same amount in wages, benefits, giving these workers the same type of training. Workers, though, typically that are in this independent type of work are not as committed or have as much job satisfaction within their work, in part because of this insecurity increases the stress and health problems they have. And then interestingly, some research looks at the co-workers. So who are the employees who are co-located with these independent contractors? And we find that they suffer as well. reduced job security. They feel like they're more insecure in their jobs. They're not as attached to their organization. They have less trust with their management. And so this looks like something that on the surface level gives a lot of benefits to the employers. It ultimately may be costly because of increased turnover and lower performance. So we've talked a bit about who does the work. Now we're going to talk about when and where the work is done. So fluid work schedules. You might have heard about the 4-day work week. There are these trials where instead of working a standard 40-hour week, they're compressing or shorting work. So it's usually 4 8-hour days. This is mostly done with higher skilled knowledge workers, seeing a lot of benefits from these trials that are happening in South Africa, the UK, Australia, the United States, that workers are having more focus in their work, shortening their meetings, less accidents or safety violations. This is more in the medical context. And that individuals are taking less time off work too, because they can bunch all their leisure or doctor's appointments on these days where they're not working. So these are trials that are really for one subset of worker, more higher skilled around this 4-day work week, and seeing a lot of benefit from these fluid schedules. Now, remote work. So the teleworking has been around since the 70s, but really with the height of the COVID-19 pandemic, we saw more individuals shifting and being able to do remote work. So these statistics are more for the US, even though they parallel to more in the global north. But we had almost everyone in the United States who could work from home was actually working from home. So about 30 to 40% of the US labor force, that was the bulk of US economic activity. So that's back to this remote work being very much linked to more higher skilled work. We found people were working longer work days, but they weren't able to maintain this still high level of productivity. People who had parents often were having to do double or triple duty in caring for their elders, caring for their kids without, strong family support. And we found individuals who didn't have children were actually putting in more hours too to sort of compensate for their coworkers that had family demands. So it's a question really about remote work. There was time saved in terms of commuting, but in terms of for the long term, for many workers, this wasn't actually a sustainable work style. And, many of our systems weren't set up for remote work. So you might be wondering, well, remote work, people can be independent, they can work at home. Do we still need managers anymore? So this is a very large study that was done around Microsoft employees. And what they found, which has been seen in other settings as well, is during the pandemic with remote work, is that your close ties, the people who were close to you got closer, and you actually became further away or more distant to your distant ties. So people that you were already close with, that relationship intensified, and then it weakened for folks further out. And middle managers had to step in to fill that role. So you can see they're spending more time on meetings, sending emails, sending IMs, because they're doing that bridging work that typically they're doing some of the bridging work that an individual worker would have done on them by themselves. So the surprising finding from the pandemic is that middle managers became even more important than ever because they were doing a lot of this social brokerage and really relying on technology. And so what the science suggests about if you're going to do this to implement more remote work is you've got to figure out what actually worked remotely, what were the interactions with technology that facilitated smooth work. I mean, Zoom, how much of us, learned to be very comfortable with Zoom? And what was it specifically that people liked about remote work? Was it different relationships with their coworkers? Was it the way the work was managed? Was it because they had less or more monitoring and contact with those middle managers? Because only when you know what worked and what didn't work can you design more successfully for the future. And then ultimately, you shouldn't let local managers decide how to implement the remote work or even giving it as a perk. It really needs to be much more of an overarching policy that's implemented across the organization. So you don't have some of your workers who are knowledge workers that get this perk while receptionists or people on the front line don't, because that can amplify fault lines already in your organization. So now how the work is being managed. So 2 different ways of how work is being organized, I would say, in this sort of future forward way. And one is moving beyond a traditional hierarchical structure to more flat forms of organizing. You may have heard of holacracy, which is a style of management that Zappos does, where individuals are in these governance groups and they get to vote on what the tasks they want to do. They can have meetings about the meetings where they vote on what are the new tasks that should be done or rules that should govern the meetings. And often these companies are relying heavily on technology like wiki pages as a repository for information. We see this, a really great example of this are in DAOs, decentralized autonomous organizations, existing completely online. There's often not even a clear leader in some of these DAOs. And instead you have individuals sort of buying these tokens to be able to come in to vote on different changes in the governance structure and what tasks are going to be done next. Algorithmic management is almost, I'd say, the other extreme. So flat organizations, collaborative, a decrease in hierarchy. In algorithmic management, there's a clear hierarchy. Who's in control is the algorithm. And this is where a lot of my research lies. So here, a great definition of algorithmic management: a system of control where self-learning algorithms are given the responsibility for making and executing decisions affecting labor, thereby limiting human involvement and oversight of the labor process. The main idea, algorithms here are doing the hiring, the firing, the decision-making, the evaluating that typically humans would have done. And we see this most clearly in the gig economy. So you think of your Ubers, your Junos, your Bolts, your Instacarts. These are companies in which you may never have an interaction with the actual employee of the organization. Instead, all of your interactions are with the algorithm. And if you're a social scientist or seen like myself, and you've seen some of these ads around these companies, you might be thinking, really? Do I ditch the 9 to 5 if I'm driving for Kareem? Am I really my own boss if I'm working for Bolt? And this has really led to the heart of a lot of my research, is where I look at ride-hailing drivers. And I ask the question, why do ride-hailing drivers drive? So I drove myself. This was part of my research. And I've also conducted a set of interviews with workers longitudinally. So I've been following them for 7 years, as well as secondary data from focus groups, guilds, things like this. This is my research data corpus just from the United States. I'm also in 8 other countries looking at different ride-hailing platforms. And I'll just give you a sneak peek under the hood of what these algorithms look like from the driver's perspective, because you may have only seen it as a customer. This is the work matching algorithm. So it tells you it takes maybe 12 minutes away to get the ride. It's a 3-time surge. Then the timer is counting down on the bottom of how long you have to accept the ride. This is from my first day driving. It says, first day, I'm sitting on a shady street 2 blocks from my house, nervously checking my phone every 20 seconds so I don't miss a ping. My phone is on my dashboard when it suddenly starts buzzing. Yay, a ride. I see a flashing circle with the timer counting down. My hands are sweaty, the phone is vibrating, and while trying to swipe, I drop the phone under the seat. Darn. After a few seconds, the phone goes quiet and I've lost my first ride. So here you get a sense of the tension that's happening in the vehicle. It's just me and the car, and I have to make these decisions about whether or not I'm going to accept the algorithm's directions. This is another algorithm, the surge algorithm. This is a heat map of the city of Chicago. The darker the color, the higher the surge. You also get these text messages that say, demand is higher than usual in Center City. Take advantage of higher than normal fares. You see this heat map when you open the app, even before you log on. So it's very much in your face how the algorithm is trying to nudge you. And Sarah says, you turn on your app and you see that very orange bright color around downtown. That means there's a surge. There's high demand. So you rush into that area. So what, my research agenda has really been looking at is this idea of choice. Like, yes, workers have choice in choosing their platform company or when and where to drive, but that choice is not as free as one would think. Their choices are constrained at that point of when there is demand. If you need to make money, you're likely driving on the weekends or around commuting time. More specifically, this study focuses around the work cycle. So from choosing when to pick up someone, to driving to pick them up, to starting the ride, to navigating with traffic, all these embodied day-to-day interactions with the app, that is what produces choice. Because at each one of these stages with the work, you're engaging with the algorithm and ultimately consenting to the work. And then last, we're going to talk about who helps with the work. And the literature here has really focused on two different segments, robots and artificial intelligence. You know, this right here is a picture of a robot that's being developed in Japan that's offering companionship. I feel like they've been using this picture for the past 5 to 6 years. It's typically not how we see robots being used. We see robots more being used in these industrial manufacturing places where they're able to do simple tasks that, you know, replace the mechanical function that humans typically have. And just some examples from the truck industry. The trucking industry, that some tasks are very easy to automate, such as long stretches on the highway. You've probably seen some of the tests, you know, that have been done by Tesla. Other tasks are almost impossible. It's very hard to back up a truck and, you know, attach it or latch it to a drop-off position. And then there are some places that are more in between, like last mile delivery, where we might see drones stepping in. But in general, we tend to see robots coming in when tasks are easy to automate it. Many more tasks are becoming computer mediated. For example, if you're using increased surveillance cameras and securities, which often boost monitoring on workers. So there's a mixed impact on what we're seeing in terms of how those robots, when they're not quite replacing humans, but actually increasing the surveillance that's felt on them. And this is a lot of research that we've been seeing about the role of AI. So AI is often used to help humans make better decisions and process more information that we could on our own. And just to give you a sense, it's being integrated every phase in the human resource cycle. So you think about recruiting. LinkedIn uses a really impressive algorithm that tries to increase the number of passive recruits. So people who aren't thinking about moving jobs yet, but they're trying to nudge them. So you'll have these chat bots reach out to these individuals and tell them, hey, your skill is a match for company Y, and encourage them to apply for jobs. Algorithms are also used in the selection process. Plyometrics is a company that does personality testing. So they'll look at individuals who are really good in the job. So maybe they're looking at risk seeking. And an example of that for an AI test would be to have people click on a balloon and see how much they'll let the balloon inflate before they will stop clicking it. And then they'll say, okay, we've trained this AI on those who are good at the job. Now we're going to look for new candidates. We'll give them this AI test to decide who might be the best fit. And we've seen some great, some interesting, very good outcomes from plyometrics in some cases, and they're able to sort of widen the diversity of who comes into a job. There's a great example from one company about where they increased the diversity of who they hired so much they had to give people their moving allowances before they started the job as opposed to reimbursement, because the group of students had such a larger amount of economic diversity. So just a few examples of how we're seeing AI being used in the human resource cycle. But ultimately, we need to pay attention because of the opacity and scale that are inherent in algorithms and how important the outcomes are, is that they're learning on data that is as good and as unbiased as possible, and being careful that, you know, just not always using the criterion of a population to always make individual decisions, that we continue to have a human in the loop. And Kathy O'Neill has done some great work around the weapons of mass destruction. So to sum up everything, we just took a wide tour around the world of future of work, talking about independent contractors. These are often sort of the new wave that we're seeing of individuals who are doing work. Technology is very much embedded in their job, whether or not they're these gig workers or if they're doing remote work or in flat organizations where technology is key to how the work is being done and managed. In some examples, such as the gig economy, algorithms are embedded, managing the work from day to day. And then lastly, we talked a little bit about how robots and AI are either replacing or working with humans, to usher in this new frontier of work. So thank you very much. You've been a 5-star audience. Shukran Gazilan and Masalama. Until the next time.
I extend thanks to the speaker on behalf of the conference participants and presenters and the organizing team. So in case if you have any kind of question from those people who deliver the recorded sessions, their emails can be shared with you guys. You can directly communicate to them. So now we are done with the first session of the day, which was mainly the guest speaker session. And afterwards, we are going to have a break for 23 minutes. And then exact at 3:20, the Gulf time, 3:20, we are going to have the sessions. So you guys are supposed to come back to this session again. And from here, you will be transferred to the other sessions, other themes. But may I request you guys to turn on your cameras if possible so that we can have a conference photo? If it's easy for some of the lovely audience. Arsalan, thank you. Okay, so can we do one thing, like those people who turn on cameras so that they should be appearing at this first screen for the time being? Can we do that?
Yes.
Yeah, please go ahead. Slowly, number is going up. The beauty of online stuff is we can do multitasking. That's a perfectly all right stuff. So it's
the internet. It's the power of internet, Dr. Tahir. It's not the online. As I mentioned in my talk, it's the internet, which is making it all possible.
It's the internet.
Yes.
Correct.
Let us all realize the power of internet.
Okay, so with your permission, we are just going to click a photo. We'll send you, through email. There you go. That's it. So now what we can do is, Wazim, if you can kindly help us, sending people into some of the groups where we can socialize with each other.
Yeah.
So in case if you want to make a comment or talk here, so you're free to talk to each other. However, you can go to different rooms.
Yeah, Dr. Tahir, with your permission, I'm just going to make some rooms. And I'm going to automatically transfer everyone to different rooms. So it is going to be random. So everyone have a good chit chat session. Just give me like 1 minute and I'm going to do it.
Okay, lovely. That's great. So meanwhile, if somebody would like to make any comment or any statement or any kind of question in case if you have, you can go ahead.
And yes, everyone can talk to each other. It's not necessary that the management or anyone would be there. They can talk to each other. So it's going to be done.
We have a 20 minutes break. Should we drop the call for a few minutes and then come back, Wasim?
Yeah, Dr. Tahir, yes. So you might be receiving some message that the breakout rooms have been made, and you can go to your rooms and just have a chit chat. It's not mandatory that it's going to be Hello, Dr. Josie, how are you? Your mic is mute. Your mic is mute.
Good evening for you. Good morning for me here. I'm fine.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. It has been a long time. Yeah, you were in the last event, and the last event we are very much honored to have you all the time with us. It's just like a family. You're a family to us now.
Thank you very much. I genuinely appreciate your support. So I'm here to stay with you.
Yeah, in the
Thank
next conference, we would love to meet you in person in Dubai, right?
Great. Yes, I will try to go. Definitely.
Yeah.
Okay. So what time is going to start the session?
Dr. Josie, the session would start at in about 15 minutes. Like, these are the social sessions, like they are networking sessions at this very moment. So after like 15 minutes, we will create the themes, like theme 1, 2, 3, 4. Then you can choose your theme and you can go to that theme after 15 minutes.
In 15 minutes more, okay?
Yes, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you.